Hi all, a very good afternoon to all of you. I warmly welcome you to our discussion series today. In this part, we will focus on Sri Lanka's geopolitical value and how it can be used to attract foreign investment to our country. We especially have our guest speaker today, Dr. Prabodha Lokuge, a senior lecturer at the Graduate Training Center and an external lecturer at the University of Vocational Technology and Open University of Sri Lanka, and also he is a researcher in international relations and tourism. So we will look at some key arguments about Sri Lanka's strategic location and the role of our surrounding seas. To begin the discussion, let's talk about using geopolitical values to attract foreign investments at the very beginning. So, Dr. Prabodha, to start, I would like to ask this question from you. How can Sri Lanka's geopolitical position be used to attract more foreign investments to our country?
Of course, Kavindra, as you said that Sri Lanka is located a very important, strategically important geopolitical location. Then it has become very popular even in the past. Sri Lanka has a unique place even in the past history. We come to know that there has been a harbour in Godava area which provided the service to the international maritime even before 2000 years. We can see some inscriptions too in Egypt museums which the Sri Lanka's international trade, how the Sri Lanka's international trade has become popular all over the world. More than the past ever in the history, now it is very crucial because of the polar regions and the bipolar powers of the world. Now the world economy has been shifted to the Asia. When we consider the maritime line which lies very close to Sri Lanka is at a very, very unique location. And this has become an opportunity, a great opportunity, as well as a risk to the national security and the sovereignty of Sri Lanka too. I believe the most of internal conflicts are also fertile with these geographical and strategical values, because that the major powers are paying much attention toward this location.
Yeah, so when talking about the geopolitical values to attract foreign investments, we cannot forget about what steps that Sri Lanka can take into turn its geopolitical value into actual economic benefits. So
yes.
What do you think about that?
Of course, then we must surely understand what the value is. Then there have been a rumor and political arguments even about the port of down south, the Hambantota harbour. This has become very, very important point more than few decades, even during the era we got the freedom. It has been a crucial point, because that if they had predicted that if there had been a harbour, it would be more practically used, because the most busiest maritime route is close to the Hambantota port. And there have been several efforts by the parties and the states, countries, to demotivate constructing the harbour close to Hambantota, because that it directly influenced to the nations like Singapore and other naval based economy generated countries. It influences even to the India. Therefore, what we can use that if we think the close maritime to Sri Lanka down south close to the Hambantota is the most busiest oil checkpoint. Daily operations of oil barrel is the maximum in between the Singapore and Strait of Malacca, Strait of Turkey, and these two destinations. In between those two destinations, millions of ships move here and there, and it is the most sensitive point to Sri Lanka. Considering only the energy and petroleum, we have big opportunity to generate the income to develop the entire nation. But the thing is, understanding this value, understanding the priority, and understanding the strategies to use the optimum use of this busiest naval route is the important thing. Having a harbour at Hambantota was not succeeded so far. Why? Even though the harbour was constructed, it was not supported by the needed facilitations and services, and the requirements to popularize the ships and vessels. Therefore, but if it can be optimized, Sri Lanka will be the most crucial naval checkpoint of the world, because as it is very close to the busiest oil checkpoint of the maritime.
Yeah, definitely. So when talking about can Sri Lanka build only through using its sea, there are many political movements that says Sri Lanka is in the middle of an important economic sea route, and Sri Lanka can only can be built by using its sea power. So do you agree with that, and what's your opinion about it?
Even theoretically, we can say so, and it's not fake. It can be true. But even the people and parties, political movements which said that Sri Lanka can be developed only by the sea and the sources of the sea, have never understood how it can be used. That is the problem. Actually, Sri Lanka has 8 times bigger sea than the land. The land area is bigger, 8 times bigger than the sea area is bigger than 8 times bigger than the land area. Therefore, the southeastern sea belongs to Sri Lanka. There are 3 areas of sea areas: territorial water, contiguous zone, as well as the economical zone. And total of this area is nearly 490,000 of square kilometers. It is fourfold than the total land area. Therefore, 8 times bigger than the total land area. Therefore, minerals and even the value of fishery industry, as well as the other resources, medicine, and not only that, the service charges which can be charged for the international maritime can be used. Not only that, not only the sea, even the airways, providing airways services to the airways can generate an income. Having a port, we can earn an income, even though any ship does not come to the Sri Lankan port. By providing the service, we can earn an income. Therefore, what we should understand, actually our sea is a big resource to the country, but it is also a risk to the country. Minimizing the risk is the way which others wish to take the power of the sea, even including our neighbors too. Therefore, we must understand both risk and the opportunity. Then we can manage how those resources should be managed. Not only that, there are very important, valuable minerals like zirconium, titanium inside of this sea. Then how can those minerals be valued, and how those can be turned into the money and economical resources? Then if we can manage those using the sea, or using only the sea, Sri Lanka can be a powerful nation in the world.
So as you mentioned, Sri Lanka locates near to the international oil checkpoints and the busiest maritime routes. If so, I would like to question you that what strategies should Sri Lanka use to get this opportunity?
Of course, Kavinda. Then having such a big treasure, we have never used this properly. That is why we are still poor. Then still we have a lot of resources which are already built by the colonial parties and imperialists. For example, the Trincomalee oil tanks. The Western powers, especially the imperialist and the colonial owners, had understood what the real value. That is why they built a few oil tanks at Trincomalee. Out of hundreds of oil tanks, we have never used at least 10 or 20 so far. Rest of those things have been abandoned. As you said, we lies between the major oil checkpoints, and there should be a nice oil deposit and a place to store the oil in this route. Sri Lanka is the paradise to do that. And if we can hire those tanks, or even though these tanks are much old, if we can create oil sits even in the sea, yet we don't excavate and explore oil. If we can keep as an oil store in Sri Lanka, for next 5 decades it will be useful. After 5 decades oil will be very rarely used because of the solar power and alternative power and energy. Not only oil, even the coal will be used for high and big level, very large level of power generation. Therefore, one of the key point is to having generating and making the arrangements to build such oil filtrations and storage in places in Sri Lanka. And it will attract more and more ships too. And but there is a risk at a war. We should protect those things too. Therefore, independent investment are needed, because that when those oil tank belongs to one party of superpowers, it will be a risk to the nation. Therefore, joint investment which does not get a risk will be important. Not only that, and providing the services and the needed goods for the ships and vessels like water and the foods and other sanitary facilitations. Not only that, even the crews should take their leaves and departures and arrival for the shipments. There should be ports and the airports too. Such facilities and the accommodations like hotels should be generated very soon, very close to the harbors, especially to the down south Hambantota port. If we can generate with some amount of investment, it will be surely recovered. That investment will be recovered within a couple of years and will lead Sri Lanka to become a rich nation of the down south region in the future.
Thank you so much for your positive perspective that you had on this thing. So when moving forward, I would like to ask that, is relying only on our sea routes enough for development, or do we need any other broader strategy when focusing about our other sectors?
Of course, as you said that Sri Lanka lies in a geopolitically important place, we must understand which strategies should be used. Sometime, for example, excavation and exploration for oil and mineral. We don't have a big economy for the primitive excavations and the arrangement of turning these minerals and the important resources into the money earning resources. We must have big capital for that. Therefore, joint ventures and investment are needed. But those agreements must be mutually benefited to the parties which help us as well as to the country. But it should be carefully done, because that powerful nations are looking and eager to get the partnership of those investment too. Being partial to one nation can make an enemy from other nations too. Therefore, very careful foreign policy is to be used. And other thing is having the strategical location. If you don't develop the infrastructure, for an example, having a big important port at Hambantota without developing the other infrastructures like hotels and enough water resource to supply water for those tanks and gas and fuel, and not only that, embarking, that means train operation and the capacity to store those and warehouse facilities and enough number of staff members and equipments and clearing facilitations like banks and financial system develop. And not only that, cruise ships and other vessels should be looked after with the needed facilities, like they should be given the resting facilities and providing the foods for those ships. Then if we can arrange those, these will never be a cost. This will be an investment to earn more than 4-5-fold than we invest. Therefore, in developing infrastructure with joint ventures, if we don't have enough money to do this, then we can develop. Not only that, there should be supporting harbors like close harbors like Gold Harbor and different harbors like developing the Colombo Harbor. When there are sudden and very urgent things, urgent occasions, we should have alternative harbors around the country. And not only that, even the airports, everything must be, and its infrastructure must be developed, facilities must be developed. Not only the development of those, we must attract the vessel providers, international maritime traders to Sri Lanka, giving them a special tariff and the taxation, the tax relief. If we can provide them to promote the tax relief and giving them low-cost operational expenditure for their import and export as well as the transshipments, it will attract more and more. Those ships will attract Sri Lanka ports, and not only that, joint ventures to excavate the minerals and joint ventures and investments for developing even the seabelt based tourism like building hospitality based businesses like hotels. Not only that, even the cruise lines. We have never attracted much cruise lines which goes all over the world. It is another tool using our seabelt. Why can't we attract such big cruise ships to Sri Lanka? Then such things, there are enough and plenty of opportunities we can use, especially having such resources, especially providing the resources to the ships which and vessels which pass our southern belt is a must.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the practical outlook that you provided when we are talking about Sri Lanka's strategic location and the role of our surrounding seas. So when delve deeper in the practical outlook, my next question for you is, how can Sri Lanka balance geopolitical opportunities while maintaining a strong national security?
Of course, that is the crucial point. As you said that the countries which have the minerals like oil, petroleum, mostly face the international conflicts to destroy the entire Iraq and the Arab region. One of the key tools was their main resource oil, because to grab the oil and their resources, major powers are they are looking toward these Arab countries with a greedy eye. Therefore, having big resources can make us big risk. To balance the powers will be important. Being partial to one nation will make us somewhat unrisk, and changing different policies will make us more risk. For an example, Libya case. Previously, Libya was so safe because it was much close to the Russians and the Warsaw parties and the laterals. Later, Libyan leader changed their stand and they lost both the East and West powers. Then, during the regime, which the Russia was led by Dmitry, and the American and the Europe invaded the country and fully destroyed, because they didn't have direct, clear foreign policy. We must have strong, whatever the party or lateral, either west or east, we must have good friends, close friends. We must have the knowledge of understanding what the real international friends are, who and which parties have already helped Sri Lanka at critical occasions. Then we must be with an alliance, but we should not make the platform to make enemies being partial to one party or in bipolar region. For an example, during Prime Minister Bandaranayake and Prime Minister Sirimao Bandaranayake, Sri Lanka was supported by China, and both China and India. But Western powers did not influence much to the Sirimao's regime, to topple the regime, because it was so closed. Recent past, we had another experience to finish the war, civil war. 30-year war was completed and it was totally finished with the power of Russia and China. I don't say that we must be much strengthened to Russia and China, but we must understand which parties have already helped us for our critical occasions. And we should not forget our close neighbor India. whenever we have a problem, we must we have to get the help and the contributions and the patronage from India. Having a good neighbor and very close neighbor is a big strength. But even during the war season, we had negative help from India. But yet the government was not totally succeeded to control the war. It was succeeded. Therefore, we must, but it doesn't say that we should not be much partial to one country or one nation or one party. Having understanding the clear and superpowers and what the role of the superpowers, big association, a big relationship, international relation with good friends, very important. But it will never be lasting because the others will try to make the internal conflicts. Having good security system in Sri Lanka, intelligent system, we should take careful action. National policy for foreign dealing and a clear national foreign policy to be established in Sri Lanka is a must. It should be done with the consultancy of the scholars of Sri Lanka and the think tank. It should never be changed by government to government. It should be a national policy. Whatever the government, it should be our strongest and stable national policy. If a country can maintain such a national policy, we can survive, we can be developed. That is the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you so much. So finally, I have another question for you, Dr. Prabodha. How important is it for Sri Lanka to actively participate in global summits and regional forums, and what changes would you recommend for them?
Of course, recently we missed few summits which were very important to Sri Lanka. One thing is BRIC, another one is Shanghai Cooperation. Shanghai Cooperation is Euro-Asian collaboration. Even though it doesn't have a few superpowers, we can trust those parties, and mutually we can deal with these parties because mutually we have an interest as well as a value each other. Another thing is BRIC. BRIC spreads even over South America, Brazil and India, China and Russia, powerful nations too. Being a part of that, we can be benefited in many ways. For tourism, for economical development, even for security. Therefore, once again I wanted to evoke you a memory from history. Prime Minister Sirimao Bandaranaike was the chair for non-alignment movement as well as Commonwealth. Both Commonwealth and non-alignment summit were held in Sri Lanka. And she was succeeded to maintain a fair relationship with even enemies. Both India and China had a big conflict, and she was the interim parties to intervene those conflicts to console those problems. Then that is dependent on the personality of our international relation and also the people and the policy of the people who govern and rule the country. Therefore, as I said to you, participation of a very important summit and being a member of the collaboration of internationally important collaboration like Shanghai Cooperation and BRIC, very important to develop a country. And not only that, we can ask for another new collaboration which Sri Lanka needs to be collaborated, and which the other countries which can help us for our mutual benefit. No one will come to help us unless they have a benefit. Therefore, we should understand which benefits can be granted toward them. We should highlight those countries. Be in a collaboration, you can be benefited in these ways. Then we can ask for the ties and the collaborations. That is what we should understand to develop our international policy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prabodha. So in this session, actually, our main focus was about Sri Lanka's geopolitical value. and how it can be used to attract foreign investment. And Dr. Prabodha actually gave us and paved the way to a very practical lens to the discussion as well. So thank you so much again. And your audience, thank you so much for the attention that you have throughout our discussion, and hope to see you again from another discussion, and have a nice day.